What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and this is part, I don't know what part it is because these are numbered oddly, but of my bootleg series, Bob Dylan reviews. We're on volume 7, No Direction Home, the soundtrack to the Martin Scorsese documentary. What I'm going to do is just kind of review this, and then I'm going to rank it as it falls in line with the others that I've already done, which is 1 and 3, 4, 5, 6. So I guess this is part 5. 2 disc set. Came out back in 2005. It is a soundtrack to the Scorsese documentary, but I believe there's also tracks on here that are not in the documentary. So I guess the decision was made to sort of flesh it out and put more material on here that was not included in the documentary. Then later on, when we get further down the line to the bootleg series, The Cutting Edge, a lot of this stuff is then later released on The Cutting Edge because disc 2 of this is essentially a whole bunch of outtakes from Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61 Revisited, which The Cutting Edge focuses on. So, plus you also get stuff on here that was already released on bootleg series number 4, the Royal Albert Hall concert, the Rolling Stone, the Like a Rolling Stone. From that is the concluding track on here. So it's an interesting release. I'm going to rank it as it falls through 1 through 7 and not consider the fact that most of the stuff on here, that a lot of the stuff on disc 2 will be released later. However, that later release is like a massive box set. And so having it all on one single disc might actually benefit this a little bit more. But what this is the documentary followed Dylan's early years all the way up through like Highway 61 Revisited, Blonde on Blonde era period. So what we get on the CD, we get 2 CDs. The first one starts in 1959 and runs all the way up through 1964, I believe. The last track is a 1964 track. Maybe a 1965 track. And then the second disc, you get 1 song, maybe 2 songs from the Bringing It All Back Home sessions, or from that album. Then I think you get every song in a different version from Highway 61 Revisited, with 2, 3 songs from Blonde on Blonde, right? I think you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're missing a couple tracks, but not everything. So it's a weird collection. For a lot of reasons. Like, I just can't wrap my head around this because in the bootleg series itself, right, you open up with 1 through 3, which was this career retrospective going back to the early 60s all the way up to like 91. And it kind of worked. The early stuff, disc 1, is a lot of pre-60 stuff, and it covers just a couple of years, all acoustic Dylan, just a voice, a guitar, a harmonica. Then disc 2 is a 10-year period from like 65 through 75, probably, the peak of his career. And then disc 3 is from like 75, 76, all the way through 91. So you have a short period, a longer period, a longer period. So it kind of works on 1 through 3. But then 4, 5, and 6 are all live documents, 2 complete concerts, plus sort of a multi-disc set that assembled songs in the order of a concert, so it feels like a concert, but it represents essentially a tour. Then you get this, which is a lot like 1 to 3, but it feels it doesn't quite have the impact that 1 through 3 has. The songs are great, maybe not as consistently great. There were some incredible highs on this release, but it just feels weird. Like disc 1 is 59 through like 64, 65, right? So you get this 6-year period in which you get some demos, you get an early home recording, you get some live stuff, you get kind of stuff that's all over the place. And then disc 2 is essentially 65 and 66, mostly 2 albums with the third, a couple tracks from the third. So you get this really condensed period that you're looking at intensely on disc 2. So the discs themselves feel lopsided. Volume 7, as it runs sequentially in like the overall thing, feels kind of lopsided. After this, we wouldn't ever go in this direction again. Instead, you get Volume 8, it's kind of a big, long chunk of time, but it all works together sort of like thematically and where Dylan was in his career. Other stuff focuses on, that the religious era and then, that like mid 80s era. And this one, I guess it's like the 60s, but there's just a weird vibe about this. The music is great, but the overall impact of this release, it's just looking at it as like the forest for the trees, it just feels like it doesn't fit in. It feels like it shouldn't have been a bootleg series. It almost feels like it should have just been its own release, especially since they don't have anything else in the series that kind of feels like this one does. That being said, there's some really fantastic stuff on here. So the first disc runs from a home demo, I believe. Yeah, says it's recorded by Dylan's high school friend of him doing an early song back in 59. We get some other home recordings of him covering some stuff. And the first 3 songs are pretty good, but I don't think it's until song 4, Song to Woody, when we actually hear like, okay, there's the Dylan, the charismatic young folk singer. And the first 3 songs are interesting, but I don't know how impactful they are. There's a version of This Land Is Your Land that's like 6 minutes long that I do think kind of drags a little. That's interesting to hear, probably more relevant and like interesting in the documentary than it is here. But it's pretty good. We get a official release of something called the Dink Song, which had been bootlegged quite a bit. It's a really good sounding version of that. We get a couple more like sort of hotel recording type tapes. But then about halfway through the set, things really start to pick up. We get the Whitmark demo version of Don't Think Twice, It's Alright, which we would see released later on a later volume of this. We get an interesting arrangement of Man of Constant Sorrow, that song that kind of became big with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? We get a pretty good Blowing in the Wind, but then we get an absolutely fantastic Masters of War, a live version of that is just feels biting, feels essential, feels like the kind of music we need now. We need artists like this to get the exposure. There are artists out there doing this stuff, especially in the hip hop community, who are doing these protest songs and doing these things, even in the punk scene, some metal bands, but something about Dylan's voice and just the guitar and the, something that's so essential that we need a voice like this now. We get a Hard Rain's Are Gonna Fall, which feels a little more somber, maybe a little more like resigned to the fact that a hard rain's gonna fall and not quite as like, let's do something about it or let's get angry as the Masters of War is. We get a pretty good When the Ship Comes In. We get an outtake of an alternate version of Mr. Tambourine Man, which has Ramblin' Jack Elliott is playing with them. And musically, it kind of works. It feels like it's maybe a little not quite as simple and direct and as effective as the version we have. But he's singing, he's harmonizing with Dylan on the verses. Doesn't work. I don't know why. Just doesn't work. Loses a little bit of that psych mystery that the original has, or the one that we know has. A live version of Chines of Freedom that's really good. And then the disc 1 closes out with an alternate take of It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. Interesting disc. It's got some really, really great moments, probably from the second half on, from song 8 on. The first half is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's an interesting listen. And like, I really like the live Masters of War, really like the live stuff towards the end of this. But I can't say it's like, so far, the stuff that has been released on this series doesn't blow my mind. Then we get to disc 2, which from start to finish is pretty essential. Alternate takes, live takes, different takes of a bunch of stuff from Bringing It All Back Home, Highway 61 Revisited, Blonde on Blonde. Some of it works spectacularly well. Some of it is just interesting. I don't think any of it doesn't work. But it's all pretty interesting. Opens up with a pretty direct, straight, shall I say beautiful She Belongs to Me that just has some absolutely amazing sort of delicate guitar parts. Dylan just sounds perfect. Just a really nice sort of simple and direct way to open the disc, which is what this needs, because the second track is the live version of Maggie's Farm from the Newport Folk Festival in 1965, and this thing is fire. This thing is essential. Like, I don't know how many times a Maggie's Farm appears on a Dylan box set. I'm like, this is essential. This is one of those songs that just brings it every time. The guitar playing on here is out of control. It is really, really good. Then we get a run of songs which have slightly different takes that I don't think maybe quite work as well as they do on their final versions, the release version. We get an alternate version of It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry, alternate version of Tombstone Blues, and a alternate take on Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, all of which are interesting, none of which quite have the same effect, I think, as the one that would be released eventually on the official studio album. Then we get a Desolation Row, which I really, really like because it doesn't have that overdubbed guitar or whatever that is that kind of, to me, dominates a lot of the sound. That's absent. Or if it's there, it's buried in the mix and it's a different sounding guitar. It's just mixed a lot lower. And I think it really, really helps the song. And to me, there's something about Desolation Row that almost kind of doesn't sound like the rest of the album to me because of the way it's mixed. And this one almost sounds more of like it could be on like Bringing It All Back Home. Just a simpler, more acoustic take, though there is some really nice guitar playing in the background. But there's something about it that is just a little more direct, a little more stripped down. It's still a studio produced version. It's not just Dylan and guitar, but there's something about it that I like a little bit more. Highway 61 Revisited, still pretty chaotic, but not as chaotic. There's not as many noises layered on top of it as the other ones. Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat, which is just kind of ferocious, a little bit slow burning, but bluesier and just grittier and rawer and just definitely hits a little bit harder. I think the last verse is maybe an alternate verse on this. Some of these have different lyrics than the ones that would be eventually released. But the Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat definitely hits hard and kind of, I don't say the versions at the end of this are better than the versions that are released, but these last 5 songs are definitely like, okay, we're getting a lot more interesting than we were in that middle period. Leopard Skin is fantastic. Stuck Inside a Mobile has Dylan doing something where he's slightly off on the phrasing, and so it just feels, it doesn't quite have that impact that the Blonde on Blonde version has. There's just something just a little off, like he's not emphasizing the right syllables. It's just a little bit different. Gives it maybe less of an impactful like feel to it. Visions of Johanna is just like this upbeat, almost jaunty type number. Completely different vibe, completely different energy, kind of fun, kind of playful, kind of one of those things you must hear, I think, because it sounds so different. Definitely not as good as the one that we would eventually get on Blonde, but it's a really interesting listen. We get a phenomenally sick live version of Ballad of a Thin Man, a live version from Edinburgh, Scotland in 1966 that is this really nice, the piano intro, just that sort of lone outlaw piano intro, just like dun, 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 just coming in before the rest of the band drops in, gives it this absolutely just ominous sort of feel to it. And then the whole thing closes out with the live version of Like a Rolling Stone, which was on Volume 4. That closing, the like, you're a liar, or you're lying, and the play it effing loud. You know, Dylan's command of the band to play it loud. If they don't like this electricity, let's give them more of it. So disc 2 is pretty ridiculous. And if you're really, really, really hardcore into Dylan, like there's a later release in the series that has these things in it, plus has many, 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 many more outtakes and alternate takes from Highway 61 Revisit and Blonde on Blonde. But where we are now in the series coming into Volume 7, like this is such a fantastic disc. Like, not really sure how many of these, not sure any of these I would maybe replace on the albums that they were on. I think maybe the ones that we eventually got released were the best versions, but the live Ballad of a Thin Man is ridiculous. The live Maggie's Farm is ridiculous. Sort of the second song and the penultimate song, so a nice kind of book ending there. She Belongs to Me is just beautiful. Desolation Row is kind of a chiller take. The Visions of Johanna, it just has a whole different energy. Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat is just like nice and gritty. So there's some really, really good stuff on here. And if you're looking for just sort of fresh takes, or, if you've heard Highway 61 and Blanc on Blanc way too many times, but you want to revisit it, but want something a little bit different, disc 2 on this is fantastic, and you probably should check it out. Yeah, but like, it's great stuff. I just can't ignore the fact that in the bootleg series, it's a lot of this will be released later. Some of it has already been released. One of it has already been released. And so it is it has become sort of like, kind of pointless in a way. Though it is nice to have it all on like a single disc or a single 2-disc. Also, it just feels weird. It just feels different than everything else that has been released. It was a soundtrack. I don't think Dylan had any say in any of this. It just feels like maybe they forced this for some reason. Like maybe the bootleg series sells really, really well and they just wanted another one in there because they didn't have one ready. I don't know. It is interesting. I guess the next bootleg series would not come out until 3 years later, so maybe they just didn't have anything ready and they didn't know what they were going to do. With the first one, the previous one came out in 2004, the next one wouldn't come out till 2008, so maybe they thought, hey, we need to just get this out. I'm sure there's reasons behind it. I don't know those reasons. I'm not into Dylan enough to know like the backstory behind all this stuff. What little I do know, I've tried to share. But yeah, some absolutely fantastic stuff on here. In no way do I think this is a bad release. Just in the context of what is a ridiculously great series, I'd have to say it falls there. And where would I put it on the list so far? I'd put it right there. I'm going to put it at the bottom. As great as that second disc is, like just the first disc, I don't know. I don't ever revisit that first disc, though there is some good stuff on the second half of it. I think it just starts off where it's more of a curio than really, really compelling stuff. So having maybe half of the first disc maybe not be something I'm interested in is enough to drop it to last place, just because I think the rest of these are so fantastic. Like, I will take a complete show, those 2 complete shows any day of the week. I love complete live shows, and this being the weird little hodgepodge that it is, it's going to be my least favorite at this point, which I think is kind of weird because it is really, really good. But yeah, I think I've said that enough. It's really good, but again, all of this stuff is really good. So that's where I put it, at the bottom of the list. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Bootleg series, whatever number this is. My number 5, this is number 7. So thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this release, what you think about it, whether you like it, don't like it, all that stuff. Whether I should reconsider that first half of CD1, whether it's better than I'm giving it credit for. You know how these things work, people. Subscribe, like, comment, and go listen to music. Go listen to disc 2. Ease yourself into the beauty of Dylan with that She Belongs to Me, and then just get ready to get rocked. Have your brain rocked with that Maggie's Farm, people. It's a fantastic Maggie's Farm. That's it. Peace. Talk to you later.